everyone, welcome to the next exciting episode of Performance Cafe. I am so pleased today that I have got Maureen Baird, as we know her, Mo, in the cafe with me today. Maureen spent a major part of her career working for a large international IT company, holding a variety of positions which included executive and senior sales, business operations, and technical management. Her industry expertise includes mining and financial services. In 2011, Maureen decided to make a radical career change. She now owns and runs a successful bespoke ceramics and pottery business, and I've seen the product, they're amazing. Maureen designs and produces her own range of ceramics and is an accredited ceramics and glass conservator or restorer. And I am so pleased to say hi to you, Maureen, and to be speaking to you again.
Hi, Innocent. How are you?
I am doing so well. Well, when we're not melting, I'm doing well.
There you go.
There you go. So, Mo, is this weather not just up your alley? I would think working with all those warm kilns might actually prepare you for this.
It does, but you know, this is weather to die. It's so hot. I really don't like it at all. It's impossible. And being a gardener as well, my poor old garden is just wilting terribly. Anyway.
It takes a toll. So, Maureen, I gave you a bio that really didn't do you all that much justice. What do you want to fill in from that bio for us so we understand your background a bit better?
Okay, so I guess by my accent, you'll gather that I was born in the UK. I've spent most of my adult life in Africa and lived in Botswana and Johannesburg predominantly. I guess what I'd like to start with is this radical career change, because it was from one end of the continuum to the other end. I mean, what could be so dramatically different? And I guess to tell you why I felt that was important for me and maybe help other people in that sort of journey, because it was a journey. So I'd had one too many business trips into Africa and Egypt and places like that. At the time, I was responsible for services, so hardware and software services wrapped around the product, so a people business for Middle East and Africa, so from Pakistan all the way down to Cape Town. And it was just one business trip too many. Then I had a really serious health scare, and I realized at the time I wasn't very happy in what I was doing. It was affecting my performance because I wasn't enjoying it that much. And I decided to take a year off. And I was really lucky and blessed that I could do that. It gave me the opportunity to reflect on what I wanted and what I needed. I realized my corporate best before date was well up, and a job change wouldn't crack it for me. I wanted more authenticity, and I wanted a bit more than wealth creation.
And then there comes this moment of, can I do something that's not corporate? That must have been a big decision, a big question.
Well, it was. I mean, I'd spent a number of years dabbling with hobbies around creativity, and I wasn't sure that I could make any money from it and whether my product would sell. So there was the expression I like to use is I didn't want to throw the bathwater and the baby out all at once. And I used all those skills that I developed at that large multinational to build a business strategy and a business development plan using those skills to identify what this business was going to look like, how I would go to market, what were my products and offerings, and what supplementary services could I offer around the bespoke ceramics that would maybe bring in some annuity revenue for me. Some good corporate words there for you.
There we go. There we go. My consulting heart is happy.
And so that led to this second career in ceramics and pottery for me.
It's so amazing because I think so many people, and not certainly not with your tenure, but I'm also what you would call a corporate expat, and it's a tough thing when we've worked so hard to get to a point to think, oh well, I've worked to this point and now I have to do something else, something new, and where do you go after that? And so. Maureen, I think for me, what made me want to interview you was I think that it was so inspirational that having made that decision, you've transitioned it so successfully. Because I think so many times there is that scare of what is my second career going to be and will I be successful? But I suppose it also depends on how we define success, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. I mean, growing up in the UK, my parents valued stuff that would create economic wealth. I decided that wasn't what I wanted any longer. It was, I wanted something that was more, I use the word creative, but it's much more than creative. It was, how could I realize my potential in talents that I hadn't yet explored? And I think that was the big turning point. And it was a bit like jumping off into fresh air. And that's about the only thing that ever frightens me is zip lining.
Yes.
This was a zip line moment, I promise you. But I think you have to learn to trust that you're given opportunities in life and points in your life where you've just got to go with the gut. If your pursuit is for happiness, and happiness is where you find your passion and learning to be more grounded in yourself, so being more of a risk taker, then those are the attributes that create something that really has value in life, for me anyway.
So what I hear you saying is that a part of this move was for you to redefine how you see success.
Yeah.
Does that also mean that we've now redefined what performance looks like? And how has that changed, do you think, over the years?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because if I think back to the 80s and the 90s, performance was equated to achieving your sales target or a project goal. And as a female in business and in the corporate world, females were given the less meaningful tasks. There was a perception that females were in the corporate world to fill in before marriage and before children. I think that's changed dramatically in the last 2 or 3 decades, in that women now have a fulfilling role in the corporate world and are truly valued for what they bring to the workplace. But I had no personal desire to have children. And I think in the IT company I worked for, it was lesser of an issue about female in the workplace. But having said that, we still operated in a patriarchal society where the executive and the senior management were 95% to 99% male. So those were challenges that we had to face and confront. And typically, females did that by working harder, working longer, and taking on the difficult jobs to prove that you could break through the glass ceiling.
Indeed. And I think that is a very interesting thing. So do you believe that there's been a change in how we measure performance? Do you think we're still running just on the numbers?
No, I don't believe that at all. I think in today's business world, if you want to attract the right skills from out there and the younger skills because I do believe you need a balanced organization across the not only the male-female spectrum, but also the age spectrum, because a team needs to be full of different sorts of people to be cohesive. We all bring value to the workplace. So I think I think I think some of the things that happened to me was we had women mentors, we had women's groups that helped us change the perception of performance and what was good and what wasn't good. I think nowadays, I think what's more important in terms of measuring performance is some of the, I think the latest word for it is ESG, economic, social, and governance measurements, where many corporations, if they want to attract the young worker into their teams, they have to have much more than just a sales target or a KPI that measures financial performance. Young people will no longer work for a company that looks good just on the stock exchange. They want that, not only climate change in the measurements of the corporation, they want much more of a sustainable company, a company that's ethically more sustainable and isn't creating economic wealth just at the cost of everything else.
Indeed, indeed. And I think often much has been said about the millennials, and a lot of it hasn't been very, very kind. But I suppose that was their gift to the world, that they were a little bit of alarm to us to sit up and think further than a paycheck or building a business. It's like, what is the legacy, not just financially, but environmentally, socially, and such?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think that movement, as the green movement grows internationally, I think we're going to see much more of that in the next 5 years. I really do believe that, and quite rightly, in my personal opinion as well.
Well, yes. I mean, if there's no earth, then there's no place to work. So there's sustainability for you at its heart. And then, well, other than how performance has changed, you've seen how the world of work changes. I know in 1980, you worked on one of the first big projects for remote working in a large organization. Tell us a little bit more about that and what your experience was.
Yeah, also a really interesting experience and an opportunity to look at the cultural shifts that are necessary in an organization to move from a fixed working location to a hot desk, if you like. What was really interesting, one of the things we saw was people built their ego based around, did they have an office? Did they have a photograph of their kids on their desks? And we got into that personal space by shifting them. We made them feel exceptionally vulnerable, not to be able to have a coat peg to hang their coat on. That was from the individual point of view, but from the management point of view, we had to go through a whole cultural shift in that the manager had to change from being a command and control leader to more of a directional leader who built and focused on the communication skills, where he led the team. And I use the word he as a generic term rather than to define a male manager. He led the team, and he had to give much more clear direction in terms of what the expectations were, how those expectations would be managed, how there would be what cultural shifts had to change in terms of the way we feedback to teams and how they had to adjust their performance. So it was this constant shifting of communications between the team. So lots of emotional stuff at an individual and management level, but also this big shift in terms of management behavior.
And having so much more experience at this than what most of us have, do you think that is the right way to go? Or do you see like a hybrid of sometimes at the office and sometimes not? What's your feel?
Well, it's been interesting since COVID. We went from probably a hybrid model to the other end of the continuum, where it was completely remote. And in talking to people that still work in the corporate world, that many have of them have experienced a isolation in working and have started to recognize my sister-in-law point in question. She is a absolute introvert, and she is now starting to talk about, no, she needs to be and sit in front of people and eyeball them, because you need to be able to test the non-verbal communication stuff that's going on. And she was exceptionally shocked that she needed that social interaction. Yesterday we had lunch with friends the gentleman is a lawyer, he runs his own lawyer practice, and he was saying how difficult in some of the negotiations in the lawyer's practice, they have found it not being able to have this eyeball to eyeball non-verbal communication as well.
Indeed. And I think the difficult thing, my personal pet peeve, if I may chip in right there, is people who have meetings where some people are virtual and some people are in the room. Yeah. That's just terrible, because then half of the people that are virtual are being left out. And I think there's a rudeness to it. People don't actually realize how much people get left out, not just because people are being, trying to be rude, but there's this thing of they already can't hear you properly. If the technology is not great for it, they're already not hearing you properly. And then you still have to add on top of that, the fact that they are sort of cut out because their face isn't being seen, so they're not having to field any questions. I wanted to ask, and I think this is one of the biggest challenges. I think when we have a very mature workforce who has a lot of background in corporate, or, the typical 9 to 5, go to the office, have to be there 5 days a week, what happens when I bring in young students, graduates, and I need to make them all of a sudden work remotely, but they don't have the tenure to understand like the rules and the discipline? What do we do there?
I think it's true if you take on people even in a non-remote environment. What I think works really well is to have a buddy system working, where you take, and it's a way of training new leaders as well. So you take a graduate or a new hire that's been around for 12 or 24 months, and you buddy them to the new hire to give them those unspoken rules around business etiquette, the way you do things in the workplace. I think that's important. I think as new hires, they come into the organization thinking that they know it all, and all of a sudden they have a hell of a wake up to discover actually they're pretty far down the totem pole, and it's a shock. It's a shock for those younger people. And how do you inculcate the unspoken rules in the workplace? And I suppose there's some unspoken rules about Zoom meetings as well. And given our multicultural society that we live in, what's acceptable for me may not be acceptable for someone else in another culture. So building a buddy system around that type of thing, you can give people the comfort they need to be able to operate successfully, but also integrate them faster into the workplace, because ultimately that's what you want and that's what you need.
Indeed. And then, as you mentioned earlier as well, the organizational culture must already be set up to be able to deal with this to start off with.
Yeah. One of the biggest issues in terms of remote working and even bringing people into the workplace is building trust. And if you don't have trust in a workplace, and it's a two-way street, organizations, you've got those people on the inside that are on the inside and trying to stay in the inside. Then you have those on the outside that are trying to get up the totem pole and get on the inside. Those are organizational dynamics that we tend to forget about, and they're forgotten about in remote working and Zoom meetings. And how do you make it an inclusive working environment for all genders, all races, all age groups. And I think that's our biggest challenge. I really do.
I agree with you. Do you think it's a problem with the nature of trust? Because I think in large organizations, trust has always been replaced with structure. I can trust you if you fill in all the forms. I can trust you if you're here at 8 and you leave at 5. I can trust you if you play by all the rules, but now all of a sudden you're not with me and the rules are changing. And how do you think that's shifted?
The rules have changed, and I've always been of the belief that trust has to start at the top as well. I think senior leadership and senior management need to walk the talk and talk the talk. Quite frequently, we see the talking of the talk, but not the walking of the talk. It's a bit like do as I say rather than what I do. And I think that's the biggest shift in performance management that has to take place. And it's linked intrinsically in my mind to management changing and evolving. The command and there's no place for a command and control manager in the organization any longer. It's the secret to successful performance, in my opinion, is communication, communication, and communication. And living what you say are the ideals of the organization. An organization is a beast in its own right. It has a culture, it has a way of working, but all of those have to align for the team to be successful. The chairman, the CEO, the operations manager, the sales manager, all have to be aligned around the same cultural values for the team to perform.
Indeed. And then if we're speaking about cultural values, I'm going to go off piste here for a second, but do you feel that there's enough representation of what the strategy requires teams to do within businesses?
I can only speak from my own experience here. I think the strategy tends to be a document that often sits in the clouds out there. It's almost a tick in a checkbox that, oh yes, we've got a strategy, we've got a vision, we know where we're going. At the end of the day, it usually comes down to the sales targets. But that is only, as we've talked about, only one aspect to performance. Performance at an individual level as well as at a corporate level. I don't think we do enough, generally speaking, to talk about strategy and what the strategic intent is. I think we're going to do so and so, and we're going to take back the competition in this market space. But it's all about the sales goal, and I think we miss the plot quite frequently. And we assume too many people understand much more than they actually do. It's my opinion, you have to tell someone something 3 times before they get it. And in a constantly shifting, evolving world, commercial world like today, things are changing on the fly all the time. So how can Joe Soap or Tandy at the end of the food chain actually know what that goal and strategic intent is if you're not constantly reiterating it?
And do you think enough gets done to, I almost want to say, translate it? Because I think there's a vast difference between having a strategic imperative and team members understanding what the practical things that they need to do to work towards it. Because it's very easy to go, oh, it's a management thing, it's a bunch of, consulting jargon just to make my heart happy.
Translating strategic intent into operational excellence it's the most difficult job in the world. But if I sit at the end of the food chain and don't understand what my tiny cog will mean to that strategic intent. So I believe it's on the layers of management to translate that strategic intent down the pyramid structure in the organization, so that Joe Blogs, Tandy can understand what their piece and their role is to achieve that strategic intent.
Perfect. So while we're on the topic of trust, you said that it sort of starts from the top down and that it needs to be there. What else, what other kind of things do you think enhances trust, maybe at a team level? So if we don't look at the whole corporate, but within a specific team, what kind of stuff do you think breeds trust there?
I think transparency breeds trust. We, as individuals, I think many of us are uncomfortable in revealing the vulnerable side of our characters and nature. I think I'm the sort of what you see is what you get sort of person, and I'm very comfortable talking about the things that make me sing and make me dance, and the things that make me uncomfortable and what I'm frightened of as well. I don't believe that all of us are that way inclined. I think it comes down to how centered and grounded you are in your own personality. And I think the corporate world can often be a very scary place where there's no friends. And it's, as I said, the ones on the outside trying to get in and the ones on the inside trying to stay inside. And that breeds fear in people. And how does one handle that fear? What's the mechanisms? What do you need to put in place at an individual level, at a management level, and a company level to actually strip that fear out of the workplace? And one of the things is mentorship and coaching and those sorts of things. But it's about fear and handling fear.
So brilliant that you bring up mentorship, because I wanted to ask you, what is the role of mentorship? I mean, it's a word that's been around for so long. Some of us ladies, and I unfortunately include myself in it, I think that it's a bit of a boys' club sometimes. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about your thoughts on mentorship.
I think mentorship can play a really important role, especially when it's coupled with coaching. I think they're two distinctive fields. I think a mentorship, providing the mentor is truly committed to the relationship, and that the timelines and goals for the mentorship are set by the mentee, and that the mentor buys into those. It becomes all about the mentee, not about the mentor, and the mentor sees it as a way of paying forward, about training and developing the next level of leadership in an organization. And it's about sharing one's experiences in the workplace with a colleague who maybe wants to know how to do something in a safe environment. Has to be a trusted relationship. There's that word again. Has to be a trusted relationship that's going to be confidential, one-to-one, where the mentor is giving the mentee some time and expertise.
So we met at the Phoenix Empowering Women's Networking event. And of course, it being a women's networking event, we did speak a lot about mentorship specifically for women. Do you think that it makes a difference whether we do it specifically for women, or do you think it's just needed throughout organizations in general?
I think both male and female people, individuals need mentors. I think what's important, it's a bit like going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. There needs to be a chemistry between the individuals that contract to this relationship. I think there should be a form of contracting, not as in a written contract, but this is what I want from it. This is what I will bring to the relationship. But I do believe male and female suffer from the same fears, the same challenges in the workplace, the same paradoxes of how do I manage, and I won't use the word work-life balance, but I have a private life and I have a work life. How do I balance the demands on my time, particularly right now during COVID, where people are at home, and my stepson tells me about how difficult he finds managing his child who's at home and doesn't understand that daddy is working. Leave me alone.
Yes.
So I do think both male and female need mentors. I really do believe that. And I believe if you complement it with some coaching, and there's a subtlety between mentor is in a business relationship. Coaching can be much more. It can be some of those other challenges in life, balancing all the things, all the balls that each of us have to bounce all the time. And I think coaching can be a much more personal relationship as well. Whereas I see, in my opinion, I see mentorship more as a business relationship, whereas you can get into more of the personal space stuff in a coaching relationship as well.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I don't know why, but I've always had this sense of actually mentorship is an incredibly personal relationship. And so that person almost becomes your sponsor. And maybe that's where I'm missing the point around mentorship, sponsoring and coaching, because that mentor eventually becomes, your sponsor within the organization and says, look, this person has done all this, they have learned this, what have you not?
No, I think the mentor can play that role as a sponsor. And I think having a sponsor, I had an international mentor at one stage, and that person actually helped me progress my career quite dramatically and quite quickly. But I think you can have different mentors in the workplace as well. You can have role-specific mentors. You can have a sponsor-mentor relationship. So I don't think there's anything that's clear-cut. I think it depends on what you need in your career at that time.
Lovely. Never thought of that. So I think for me, mentorship has always been a broad-based, agreed, very structured approach. One person to one mentee. And what you're saying is you're blowing it up and saying, but hold on, this stuff is malleable and we can actually build a program that's got multiple facets to it. Yes. So an interesting thing around mentorship is it's sometimes seen as a little bit of an exclusive thing, for want of a better word. And so what that means is that very often people already have privilege, people already have better educations that are more eloquent, whatever the case may be, have better connections through the family, that they land up in these things. How do we break that down? And is it possible to do quality mentorship but for a broader base of people?
It's interesting you asked the question, because when I was preparing for today, typically we appoint mentors to high performance, high flyers. And then we miss a plot somewhere along the line in that. How can you identify potential if you don't explore what the potential is in each and every individual? I would almost like to think of it as a more of an informal structure where we reach more people. And if you have a high-performing individual, maybe one of the things that you want to test and grow and improve on is leadership skills and stuff like that. So you could adopt a more informal structure where one person, because you don't want the organisation to become stymied and stop because of all this mentorship going on. That's why I
Yes.
think it should become more of an informal structure where high flyers get given a challenge to take on their informal mentorship group. And you could structure it so long in the company. These are my skill sets. This is maybe your critical thinking skills need to improve, something like that. And this is the way that we can grow the person by giving them more responsibility in an informal way at the same time. I don't know. But it's interesting. It shouldn't just be high flyers. I think we missed the plot. And particularly in South Africa, with so many of us having had much more advantage than some of the others, other people, I think we have to focus on that to bring those new leaders forward.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think what's really interesting is you were speaking about, putting together a plan of, well, the person must have so much tenure, must have so much of this, must have so much of that. And it's so interesting because, of course, now, most people sort of go, well, I've been here for 2-3 years, I'm out of here. I'm going to go and look for something new to learn and a new way to express myself. So it's an interesting conundrum of how we bring those together. But I agree with you. I love this two-part model of, yes, let the high flyers have their moment, but also there's more. And maybe that comes back to how we describe and what we expect from performance. Because maybe part of the problem is, to come back to our first question on the nature of performance, is when I certainly was much younger, performance was, there's a job description and you've got to stick to that job description, whether you match it perfectly or not. So it is, as you said earlier, a ever-changing environment.
I also think, I mean, I was reading a statistic earlier last week about how many jobs have been lost since COVID, something like 25% in the corporate world. So if there's 25% jobs less available, there's going to be 25% less job hopping. That you won't be able to hop as much. And I mean, it was always a challenge to retain skills, critical skills. Maybe that's something that the organisation now needs to refocus on, particularly at this time. I mean, skills retention and creating a job experience that is right for the moment and right for the person. I think we're going to have some really interesting times in front of us in the next 5 years in terms of the fallout from COVID and not only the emotional isolation, the changes. I don't think we yet understand the changes that are going to take place in the workplace. I really don't.
Indeed. It's quite a leap from the first remote working project in the 1980s to this. It's probably a totally different playing field. We spoke earlier, now you and I offline spoke about vulnerability just in general and the importance of it. What do we say to managers who say, I don't know how to be vulnerable? Where is the line of vulnerable when working with my people so that I can be accessible because I'm vulnerable, but I'm not, I can still be respected and I'm still seen as responsible and capable? What would you say? Where lies the line?
I think it's a different line for different individuals. You have to be personally comfortable in exposing yourself to your colleagues and the people that you manage. But having said that, I think it would make you a much more authentic person by exposing that vulnerability. And I am of the belief that respect is earned, not given. It's not positional. So if you can find a way where you are individually comfortable in exposing more of yourself, it will give the person that you're exposing yourself to, that sounds awful,
Your vulnerability too.
It will make that person feel more comfortable in exposing their fears to you as their manager. And then the respect becomes tenfold, because it becomes almost like a snowball. And that trust then builds into the workplace. If the manager can show that they can be trusted, that they're prepared to trust you with some of their fears, that builds respect. It builds a much more healthy working environment. And trust is an interesting thing. If you feel trusted and are trusted, you will take more risks. And more risks equals more performance, both at an individual level as well as at a company level. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense because it's an interesting thing. I've always had this thing. I don't know where I even got it. It probably wasn't even my own idea. But that creativity and innovation cannot be bred in an environment that doesn't allow for trust. Because if I don't know that failure will not be condemned, I'm not going to take the risk.
Absolutely. 100%.
And so that is what you're saying, is that you have to trust and you have to let people fail and do good and succeed, and then grow that into more and more and more and more trust, which will grow to more innovation and more success and more performance.
And that's where the role of the manager as the coach becomes more important. A different facet of a manager being a coach. Yes, you did this in this way. What can you learn from the experience? What would you have done differently for a different outcome? So the manager becomes a coach in the workplace in that case.
Wonderful. I know that we're supposed to be wrapping up, but I just want to ask you, do you want to tell us a bit more of the manager as a coach?
Yeah, I firmly believe that the style of communication that you use encourages risk-taking. So if you are a dogmatic, goal-driven individual, gung-ho, this is what we've got to do, this is the way we've got to do it, you don't get the best out of people. You're not allowing them to learn and find their way of doing it. You're giving them your way of doing it. That doesn't bring the best skill or the talent of the individual to the table. So by helping them through this coaching process, learn that maybe wasn't the best way of doing it. How would you have done it now, knowing what you know today? What would you do differently? It's just a whole different way of communicating with teams and individuals.
I hear you. And what I really love about that, and I think I've seen situations where managers go, well, I already spend so much time on my people, to coach will take so much time. But when you phrase it that way, I almost feel like you're teaching someone and actually taking the pressure off you, because next time around they're going to think for themselves. So actually coaching for managers is actually such a great return on investment.
Absolutely. It ultimately frees you up. I mean, what is your job after all as a manager? It's not to command and control. It's actually to lead the individual to learn for themselves.
So it's so interesting. It's the second time or the third time that you've made that reference of it's not about command and control. But don't you think that in large companies, and I love it. Let me first just say this. I absolutely love it. I don't believe in command and control at all. I think it's antiquated. But don't you think that in large organizations we need command and control in order to ensure scalability, consistency, and discipline? Or is there a better way of doing it?
I think there's a better way of doing it. There has to be some processes and some procedures. You're running a business after all, and you have an obligation to the shareholder. But within that spectrum of command and control, there has to be a freedom to do things a better way. We will never innovate if we follow the same rigid rules. I think that's the beauty of a process-driven organisation, in that the process takes care of the stuff. And yes, to understand the obligations of the process, you need to have a forecasting meeting on a weekly, daily basis, whatever the organisation says, because that allows the organisation to run along. But at an individual level, you need to do things differently to allow the staff to blossom and to encourage a high performance culture. That's what we're talking about, an organization that has a high performance culture.
With you entirely. Just for the viewers who don't understand what a process-driven organization is, just want to give us a little bit of background on that. And what's the other alternative?
Chaos. So a process-driven organization is an organization where the management processes, sales processes are predefined with given actions and interactions to allow the organization to operate in a consistent manner. That's probably the shortest synopsis I can give you of a process-driven organization. It means that you'll get the same results, not as in outcomes, but the same results by executing the process time and time again. So it's a structured approach to running a business. The alternative really is chaos, where the management team and management system just runs along haphazardly, as they tended to do in the 60s and the 70s, before much of business was formalized. The interesting part about a process-driven organization is you can stick it through a model, and you can look at how you can change your processes for process improvement or process degradation.
Yes.
A typical example is in like a warehouse scenario, which we used to use it in the business school to demonstrate why process-driven organizations were effective. If you took a logistics company or a manufacturing company and you actually overloaded one area of the process, you would drive this factory to absolute distraction. And things were crashing into each other, and you weren't getting your goods to your clients. So a structured approach to running a business.
Okay. And what I'm understanding from it is that there is an ability to create an organization that is more focused around the business's structuring, not the process. So it's about a bunch of egos. It's not about how we actually deliver what we said we would. So that's what could lead to that chaos, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so awesome. So thanks for that clarification, Maureen. But now there's been this life change. Tell us more about what you're up to right now, and what exciting projects do you have going?
So just before COVID, with the decline in the economy that took place at the latter part of last year, the bespoke aspects of my business, where I was designing and producing ranges for boutique type shop outlets, started to decline. And that started me on a whole new chain of thought around what was in my new ideas box, which we've spoken about before. I was on the cusp of actually starting to redrive my sales process to find some new outlets, and I had a whole new range of ceramics planned. I'd made the ceramics and I was in the decorating process, and then COVID struck, which meant that I had to go back to the drawing board and say, well, what am I going to do now? How am I going to financially survive when shops are closed, people don't have money? This is a luxury goods business, and I mean, I was fortunate enough to have a backlog of restoration conservation work on the workbench, which has kept me going in the last 6 to 9 months. But when I'm now coming out of that side of the business, I've still got work on the bench, but I'm starting to feel some new inspiration in terms of some new designs. I've got some really funky stuff that I'm about to launch, which they're very naughty. It's going to make people laugh. It's lovely. Fat lady type milk jugs, so with boobs on them. Coffee mugs and cappuccino cups, a bit like Borat wearing a mankini.
Oh, wow.
3D appendages. So by the middle of November, I want to be in the shops, new shops as well as the shops that I've been in to date, but with stuff that's going to make people laugh. I want to capture people's attention by going, oh, this has been a really horrible year. And let's face it, it has. But we can still laugh. We can still have fun. And so it's going to be completely different to some of the more arty stuff that you've seen. And yeah, I want people to laugh. I want people to... I want to laugh as well, to be quite frank. Yes. I want to laugh. I want to feel light-hearted about the world. That this will come to an end at some stage. And so I'll carry on with my conservation work. I've had 4 new commissions come in the last month or so. But at the same time, I want to be light-hearted and I want to get some new stuff into shops and talk to my direct customer base and say, hey guys, what do you want?
Lovely, lovely. And Maureen, so I've actually seen some of your stuff and it is absolutely beautiful. I will not forget that plate, Lost. It is absolutely gorgeous. Or sorry, Lost, not Lost. And so if people want to get hold of you, what email address can they use, going forward?
Okay, so my email address for the business is Mobee, MOBEE, ceramics, CERAMICS @gmail.com. I've also got a Facebook page which you can have a look at and pick some designs and we can work on that. And my Facebook page is also called Mobee Ceramics, all one word. I don't have a web page.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And I don't want a web page because I don't make cookie cutter stuff. Right? My stuff tends to be unique and different and it's on what the person wants.
Beautiful. So that is wonderful. What I'm going to do is in our session notes for this, I will include your Gmail, I'll include your Facebook page and an invitation, of course, for all the viewers that see this to please go and take a look at the Facebook page, appreciate the art and hopefully also order something. But Maureen, before I let you go, I want to abuse your knowledge. I'd like to ask you to please explain your new ideas folder as a productivity tip for the viewers, because I absolutely adore this.
Okay, so my new ideas folder, it's pretty full as we've discussed, but when going through life, when something quirks, just sparks a little quirk or an idea, I park it, I stash it away in that folder. Because I can't forget it when it's in the folder. I can go back and revisit my folder all the time. But it also means that I'm not cutting myself off by having mush in my head. I've put it somewhere where I can go back to it and I can revisit it. But I'm also opening myself up to more and more new ideas. So that's where the ceramics restoration and conservation idea came from. It was in that folder. It was something that I'd heard about, I was interested in doing. And when I could take a 6-month sabbatical from the business, I went off and did the course. And it's actually saved me during COVID. So it's a productivity tip to free your brain up, open yourself up to new ideas by not losing the ones that you've already come across.
What I really liked about the idea when you taught me to do this, because I've now also gotten ideas, but my mind's on my iPad, it's not that well structured, but everything's going in there for now, is that sometimes you need to do something fresh. And you're like, I don't even know where to start. And then to go and look in the new ideas folder, it's kind of like, oh, I forgot, I've got that. And it sets you off and it just gives you that spark to carry on doing, building something new. So thank you for that.
I suppose as a creative person, I suffer from block. It's not writer's block, it's creative block. The external world starts to invade and get in the way. This is where I can go and find that inspiration again.
Definitely. Maureen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here with us today. It has been so awesome to learn from you. I'm sure we could have carried on talking for another 7 hours. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to having people reach out to you.
Thank you very much, Innocent. You take care and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
So everyone, how lucky are we to have had the time with Maureen? We thank her once again. Please do go and take a look at Moby Ceramics on Facebook. I will add her email at the bottom. Remember, the stuff is bespoke, so you can commission whatever you need from that. And just lovely to have someone with such vast experience speak to us about performance, about mentorship and trust. And I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. And I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday when we are visiting solo, just you and I, at the Performance Cafe. Have a great week forward.